have to confess, Joris, you represent the oldest body here. I don't mean you personally, I mean the organization that he represents.
Thank you, that's very kind of you.
I have no idea of your chronological age. And I really confess, and I know plenty about biotech, I had never heard of the IABS.
It's a shame.
I don't know whether that's my failing or the IABS is failing, but tell us what it does and how it fits into this, because it's been around a long time. But tell us how it fits into this kind of complex world of IMI, national PPPs, and framework, the European Research Area, and the broad global sphere in which what we hope is innovative research takes place.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. So first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting us here. So I will talk in my experience, a little bit expertise from public-private partnerships, starting with Gavi, all over PPDs like tuberculosis, even HIV vaccine initiatives. And now recently being heavily involved in the zoonosis anticipation and preparedness initiative from IMI, which is a fantastic project and where we have a lot of excitement and a commitment to find new solutions. So what I want to say in this expertise, I want to start with a positive note about vaccines. The low-hanging fruits have been consumed since a long time, but these low-hanging fruits, the classical vaccines, have saved and still save, and I hope they will save even more million lives a year. And we have here in the room partners like Médecins Sans Frontières, like the industry, who can all witness about the need of vaccines and the interest even in developing countries. When you go to Congo and you ask to a father how many children he has, very often you get the answer, wait until they are 5 years old, and then we will see who survived pertussis, measles, etc., etc. I think this is self-explaining. However, we have a couple of new threats, and I have been involved in that, like AIDS, tuberculosis, not to talk about Ebola, it has been touched already sufficiently. And new threats that, like the pandemic flu and others, that come to us where we really need innovative approaches. The classical approaches are done, I should say. So I like you to remember that almost every couple of years we have a new infectious disease in humans. And 60 to 70% of these new infectious diseases in humans have an animal origin. So in an ideal world, you should say it is sufficient to detect the bug or the virus in the animals. You prevent it from jumping to humans, and then the case is done. However, the real world is totally different and more complicated. So I want to stress here the very important point that we must learn, all of us, to listen, to dialogue, to open eyes and ears, and collaborate between human health and animal health. And we are very well placed here in the city of Lyon. We invent, in fact, nothing. So the famous saying of Charles Mérieux, the late Dr. Charles Mérieux, was, sans frontières entre les deux médecines. No borders between the two medicines. And that's the key of his successes in developing vaccines in the 40s, 50s, and later on. So it also means that we have to think out of the box. And it was touched already yesterday and in the iProof meeting last year. So we should not stick to our scientific approaches, which are vast, limited to biology. We also have to be concerned about social and human sciences, economics, benefit-risk approaches. It was mentioned by Michel Goldman yesterday. So transdisciplinary thinking will be very important. And also, when in iProof, we focalize on Europe because it's the property of the beast, we have to think globally. In 24 hours, an infectious agent is from here to the other side of the world. And I'm sure here in the room there are a lot of people who think globally, although we should not be naive, there are a lot of European interests. Thinking globally, it's easier said than done, and particularly it has been touched, I think, by Médecins Sans Frontières already, the translation. Innovate and finding, in principle, in theory, ways to solve infectious diseases on the bench, it's not easy, but it's relatively easy. And the value of that has been mentioned, and this is a huge problem. And there it's where PPPs really intervene. And then we come also to the problem of de-risking. De-risking is much more complicated than just finding innovative ways, which are very important, of course, of financing, like the innovation finance for infectious diseases that has been launched in summer 2015. De-risking technical, but also de-risking what will the regulatory ask. And that's why we have a long way to do still, unfortunately, in dialogue. So that means that we should try to dialogue from the early beginning of projects with regulatory agencies. All companies have excellent specialists on regulatory affairs, but also those people like to know what will the official agencies really want. So this, it's in fact the core business of International Alliance for Biological Standardization, and coming back on the 60 or 61 year anniversary. So IABS was launched here by the late Dr. Charles Mérieux and the late President Edouard Herriot in the city town hill, where we will be tonight, in 1955. This was the first Congress of IABS, and the objective was, because this beginning European and also in other parts of the world vaccine industry, in complement to governments that produced in that time vaccines, they needed a framework in order to at least have some rules about safety and efficacy. So we do not invent anything, but the dialogue is very important. And sometimes people have to isolate themselves and find somewhere an independent platform in order to be able to discuss. And this is something we also live daily in the ZAPI project. The ZAPI project is about a platform. So we go to a new paradigm. Classically, regulatory people and all of us, we develop a product, a vaccine, whether it's monovalent, multivalent, whatsoever. Now, we try to develop platforms in order to have a tool where, in case of a new emergency, we can insert the genomic material that will express the right epitopes for protection in order to save time for search production in face of a pandemic, for example.
This is an IMI project.
This is an IMI project.
Yeah.
So
is that sort of using synthetic biology or genomics more than anything else?
It's proteomics, genomics, all the omics.
It's sort of a plug-and-play platform for antigen discovery.
Here mathematics come in, because it also involves, for example, in silico determination of a new agent. In theory, within 24 hours, you should be able to know which part of the virus will protect, and then you have to insert it. But before you can do that, you must go to the regulatory process to regulate somewhere, find a regulatory framework which does not exist today for the platform.
So that sounds interesting.
So, this is a huge challenge, and for innovative thinking of regulatory agencies, and like Michel Goldman proposed already last year, we need regulatory science. We should seriously think about that. So I think I talked a lot, only one question and one comment about de-risking. So I stress what I said. De-risking is much more than just financial, technical. It's also implying regulatory. And I have a question to you, to the audience. All of you who are involved in vaccines know we have regular shortages of vaccines, whether it's in developed or developing countries. So I think we have also to think seriously, how will innovative vaccines, and I cite Gavi, be available everywhere, every time, everywhere, every child, in fact. And how also can we do more to break down non-tariff barriers? Example, if we find here specific ways for batch release or batch control, using less or not using animals, and other parts of the world continue to do it, then there is a big problem for pharmaceutical companies who will have to do, in fact, the new way of doing things and will be obliged if they want to export, continue to do the old things. So this is kind of things we should think about, but I think there we have to involve really our political partners to do all that.